Welcome out to this episode of Tax Sale Titans. I'm Shade Foray. I'm here with Stephen Swenson. This is episode 15. We're going to be talking about a number of interesting topics here tonight. So thanks for being with us.
Yeah, definitely. We're excited to be able to start doing these and appreciate you here. We've got a lot of interesting things to talk about tonight. We're going to go ahead and look at a Michigan auction that took place near the end of 2025. Kind of review Michigan, look at some properties there, go over some good properties, look at anything that we may think would maybe be a property we would avoid. Then we're going to talk about, I didn't change that. We're actually going to be talking about how to determine if a lot is buildable or not. So we're going to go look at and talk about how we do that, how we go and look at the city information and what's required. And then we're going to go look at a upcoming auction in Kern County, California.
After that, we're going to do a little Q&A with answering some of the questions there from our members before we wrap things up. So just a quick shout out to our members and our new advanced coaching students here. Happy to have all of you with us, and also even those of you also that follow us on, on YouTube or other places.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we want to thank anyone who's following us, and definitely a shout out to our program members. We just got off the weekly webinar, and so we supported you guys. We support and are grateful you guys were with us there. What we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned, is we're going to be going over a lot of information. But if you'd like to learn more about it, we still have a ticket left, ticket and a guest left for our Atlanta, Georgia 3-day that's coming up this weekend. If you're going to be in the area, if you'd like to come out and see us, if we can get you a ticket for $2.99 by either joining the membership, or you can view our preview webinar and qualify that way. But it's 3 days with us. We're really going to teach you everything you need to know about getting started with tax sale investing.
Yeah, it is a lot more time for us. 3 full days. Lunches are included in that, and we generally go from morning until night. So I would love to have you out so we can cover all of that, and yeah, I'd love to meet you. It's always great to do in person.
Yeah, what we're going to be talking about tonight is we're going to be talking about the Michigan tax sales. Now, they just wrapped up, here in 2025, so they probably won't start up again until around the end of summer. But I thought it was kind of interesting. I wasn't planning on reviewing this state, but I started kind of looking at some different properties, and I found tax deed properties that sold a few months ago that are now currently on the market. And so I thought, that's kind of interesting. Let's go through and review a few of these properties and kind of go through how Michigan works, especially for our members and followers. It will help them learn more about Michigan so that we can kind of look at some of the properties here next year or this year and bid at these different auctions that are taking place.
Yeah, we actually have a fair amount of experience with Michigan. We've been participating in their auctions for a long time. It's probably 10 years ago, at least, that we did our first Michigan sale, and maybe even longer. But some things that are unique about Michigan. So it is a tax deed state, meaning that all the counties there are going to offer up the properties there after they have foreclosed on them. And they have their annual sales here. But one of the things about Michigan that is unique is that they have, or at least most of the state is all listed on the same website, which really simplifies things for us. That's the tax-sale.info. That is their website. It's kind of a state-operated website here that they use to list all of their properties and the auctions that they do, online auctions. So basically, in the month of, I want to say August, I think, is when Michigan holds all of their sales, at least when they start. It could be September, but essentially what they do is they basically have sales happening every couple days. There is a new auction happening for the properties there, and anything that isn't purchased at the auctions gets offered up again in a kind of resale after that, and then there is an over-the-counter sale after that for anything else that is still left over. So they've got a pretty good system in place. The other thing that's unique about Michigan is they're one of the few places in the country that will provide interior images in some cases on properties, along with current images as well, which is something we don't always get from counties as well. But one thing about Michigan is that they are required to go and place a sign there in front of the property, kind of like they do in New York. And so because of that, they do get images there of the properties, and sometimes interior images as well. So in a lot of the Michigan sales we're looking at, we have more information than we have with most tax sales.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Michigan utilizes a premium bid method, which means that they're going to start at the delinquent taxes, penalties, and fees, and then bid up in price. In fact, the auction that we're looking at now was called kind of their over-the-counter minimum offer sale. And so what they did is they took all of these properties that didn't sell during the normal tax sale, and then again during the resale, and they offer them up starting at $100. And so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at now, is going through and reviewing some of these properties. Now you get to pass that over to me, Shade.
Oh yeah, let me do that.
Okay, perfect. So like we, clicked the wrong button. There we go. So like we talked about, this is the Michigan kind of over-the-counter reoffer. Their no reserve auction is actually what they call it. So all of the properties that went through the first auction and then went through their second reoffer auction, these are the properties that didn't sell. Now, that doesn't mean that all the properties are junk. There is going to be a lot of junk in this list, but it could be because the opening bid didn't make sense. The opening bid was just too high. Like, for example, if you had a $30,000 lot, but the opening bid was 25 grand, it probably is not going to sell. No one's going to want to buy property in a tax sale for close to market value price. And so there's a number of different reasons why these properties ended up in here. They may not have been offered up or had the right price to begin with, but you can see, some of these different properties sold for $200, $600. And the first one, I was kind of interested. I looked at some of these boat harbors, Shade, before the auction. I was wondering if they could be worth, picking up for $100. I'm not sure what type of HOA fee, but you think that you could rent that out for, more than $100 a month.
Yeah, well, certainly they're valued pretty high, and yeah, I think they probably are pretty good usable lots there.
In fact, let me go back here so I click on that so I don't have to do that every time.
In fact, yeah, my only hesitation is I just don't know a lot about boat docks. But if I had any experience with boat docks, I think there's probably it's real estate market just like anywhere else, and people need a place to park their boats, and so yeah, I'm sure you can do pretty well with it. It's just like lots, and like vacant lots there that people build their houses on. They vary. You have different lots here.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, we're looking at some of these lots right here. I found it kind of interesting. You see this 108, 109, 110, and 111, and they all got purchased for $550. So there was probably somebody that put their reserve at $500, and the other investor put his at, let's say, $600 or whatever he had it, and so he won each one of these, or she won each one of these for $550. Now, one thing that we need to be worried about, or at least consider when we're looking at HO properties, is what is the HOA, the POA fee. Sometimes it can totally be worth it to buy these type of properties. They could be in great areas, but it also could be a situation where the POA is so high, it's not going to make any sense to buy property there.
Yeah. In fact, I love lots like these. There are actually a lot of really nice lots in this sale, and some of these may have ended up because they had higher opening bid amounts that didn't make as much sense. We actually found a lot of lots like this, though, nice building lots that were in areas with construction that was taking place, places where you can see other homes around that are nice and that have been built on the property. In fact, we love building lots like that. Really, you can do really well with building lots like these.
Yeah, so we can see the county values at around $6,000 or so as far as what they think the assessed value is on the property. As we looked here, the property's kind of located right here in this area. And then there's also some properties over here in this area as well that are included on that list. And so What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look up this property on Redfin real quick. And one thing I kind of found interesting is these properties right here, this 12.9, that's the one right here. This is the one that essentially got picked up in the tax sale. And then these other ones are these $25,000 and $20,000 ones here. So, if we were to come in here and filter this out just to land, you can see that the person that bought these properties, essentially is relisting them for sale now. The cheapest one at 12.9, and some of the other ones at 2,500. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I looked into the sales. There's not a huge amount of property selling here. It's kind of a little bit smaller area here within this community, but it is a nice community. And, as far as how many properties are selling a year, there's about a year's worth of turnover per year. But the prices that they are selling for are pretty high. So when he spent $500 on each one of these lots, asking $25,000, $13,000. Now for us, if we pay $500, we probably try to blow it out for $5 or $6 grand. That way we can sell it for quite a bit quicker. And in a way, he's kind of given himself his own competition, but it was kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, it's also one of the reasons why we say, in an area, you wouldn't want to buy more than one property if you can win a property here. It's why you wouldn't want to buy 5 properties in the same little, little rural area. And it's because in a lot of ways, you'd be your own competition, and, be forced to take a longer time in order to sell the properties, because it's not as if it's a market that's picking a lot of stuff up. You're going to have to sell them, based on the price. And because of that, you're probably not going to be able to sell more than one of them at a time.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. I thought this was kind of an interesting property as well. They paid $14,000 for it. Now, it does need a lot of work, but it is kind of interesting. The SEV is at 180. And so really what we do is we double that to kind of determine what the county thinks the assessed or market value is. So, essentially their SEV is half of what market value is.
Yeah. In fact, it's at least twice, what that SEV number is. And sometimes with some properties, it seems like it's, even a little bit more. But at 180,000 SEV, it's a pretty substantial value here, on the property. It seems like a pretty nice property.
Yeah. It does need a lot of work, and we'll look at it here in a second. It's actually currently on the market. But, you can see the sign that they put in the property there. But when we were talking about the type of photos they provide, this is where it really becomes healthy. So you can see that it definitely needs, to be completely redone. But in kind of looking through the photos, it looks like it's actually all still. Like the whole framing of it is a still framed building, but it is quite large. And, obviously this isn't for everyone. We're not going to be doing this. In fact, this isn't the kind of deal that even me and Shade would really know what to do with. But for the right type of investor, you could do really something with this structure. Sure, you would need to go in there and replace a lot of things and redo it. But when I was looking at commercial properties within the area, it was kind of hard to find comps of what you could redo this into. But some of the comparable size properties were going for $5 to $10 million. There were even some that were more expensive than that. So, it may cost $1 million to renovate this, but this property at that point, depending if it was, warehouse or office or whatever you decided to build or make it into, could be worth $5 or $6 million. Now, that was one thing I noticed as well, is it does look like that's newer, air conditioning right there.
Yeah, I mean, like the property itself, it didn't look like it was wet inside there. It looks like it was pretty well dry. I didn't see too many problems there, with it. But it's also a big commercial property, which are much more challenging to try to evaluate. So much more square footage, uh, and it's not going to be as easy when you're dealing with commercial properties. Finding things like comps is going to be completely different, and so those would be additional obstacles as well.
Yeah. So here's the property currently for sale. You can see that they're listing it for 191,000. They're selling it as is. It's 22,000 square feet. You can see that he's offering owner financing, which would make sense because to do owner financing, he may be require $50,000 down. Well, we know that that they only paid 14,000 for it, so that $50,000 down is automatically going to pay off their investment in it. And it talks about what it can be used for and kind of what's within the area. But what he's trying to do is just try to resell this, sell it as is, and flip it and make a quick profit on it.
Yeah.
Go down and look at a couple more. You can see all of these ones that sold, some of these are different HOAs, 150. There's quite a few lots and things that sold under $500 in this auction.
Yeah, you can see selling for properties that are sold for $100.
Yeah, well, and there's some that didn't even get bids. Now I forgot which one I was looking at. 70, 80. It was quite a big sale. I was trying to kind of pick out some of the properties that had listed and then resold so we can kind of see what investors are doing with them. This was a property right here. That was kind of interesting because they're trying to resell this now. Now, one thing, for me and Shade, we probably wouldn't even have bid on this property unless we, knew that they only had a smaller size because it's only 0.09 of an acre. You can see that it's, valued at about, 10 grand or so. And but here we can go ahead and look at the property. And you can see that they've currently got it for sale for 12 grand. And I didn't realize it had a garage on it. So that's probably, that garage needs some work, but you can see that they essentially relisted it. So they picked it up for, what was it, 650, and ended up turning around and they're listing it for 12 grand. And they probably got the deed. I think this was the November auction. So they probably got the deed, a couple months. It's probably been on the market for a couple months. They're really trying to get pretty high prices for it. For us, we'd rather drop that price down and get rid of it quicker if we could. Go down
There's a
and look
lot
at,
of properties.
yeah,
You know,
it's
you know,
such a big list.
yeah, it's a pretty easy online auction to participate in, to get registered with and whatnot. So I think there is a lot of appeal there, with those sales. And over the course of about a month, they probably sell at least 2,000 or 3,000 properties, if not more.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Got myself mixed up. I was looking at this 18 lot here, and this is one thing I kind of found interesting. I got a quick clicking on that.
The SEV is high on it at 24.
Well, and that's kind of what interested me at first, but that's because there used to be an old dilapidated structure on the property.
No, that makes more sense then.
We can see that it's located right here. Here's where you can kind of see the structure used to be. If we go down here to the street view, it really is that's what it used to look like.
News it was a fire. Have they ever moved it yet?
Yeah. Here's the lot now. So, I mean, it's a pretty good clean lot, but one thing that I found that was kind of interesting here is I went to go look and see well, you know, they only paid $250 for it. Is it a good deal or not? You know, based on what's for sale within the area. And so what we'll do is we'll go here and we'll just look at the land that is for sale. And then we're going to go to the low to high. Now, one thing that concerned me when I first looked at this is I saw all of these $2,000 lots for sale, you know, but then as I started looking into them, I realized that all of these are land bank lots. So these are all being offered through the city land bank system, and they require you to essentially have a total plan in place. You need to provide the funding or have the finances. You know, they provide you to, they'll sell it to you for $2,000, but you're going to have all of these responsibilities to build on it within the next 12 months and have financing to do so. So in a way, these really aren't our competition because of the fact that you couldn't just buy that lot and sit on the lot for 5 years. If you bought that lot, you'd have to build on it immediately. And so as we go through here, you know, the first lot that's not within the land bank, you know, starts at 30 grand. This lot here, which is actually kind of similar to our lot, is a land bank property, and they're starting at 50. So when I was looking at the sold property in this area, a lot like this would probably sell for about 5 to 10,000. You know, usually would be nervous about all of these land bank properties, but the fact that this really isn't our competition, you know, would still, he probably would do pretty well for picking that up for $250.
Yeah, it ends up being a pretty good win.
We'll go look at one more. And there was tons of great properties. These ones are kind of the junk properties. So I thought it was kind of interesting to go through it. There were some really good properties that did sell in the regular auction. And for 70, 80. Okay. So this property here as well, we can see that they picked it up for 10,000, and they're actually going through the process of selling it as is right now as well. Go ahead and look it up on Zillow.
How much do they have listed for?
79,000.
And you know, we've got the interior images there on it.
Yeah, so they bought it for 10,000 and
Listed for 79.
Yeah, and really you can tell all they really kind of did at this point is they secured the property, they went inside, they probably cleared some stuff out. It sounds like that they bought like the roof shingles but haven't put on the new shingles yet, so they're just going to let the next investor do it. But you can see that they kind of decided we're not going to go ahead and do it. We're just going to sell this property as is and let the new investor do it. You know, let's say that they have an additional 9,500 into it. So let's say they're into it 20 grand, they sell it for 80 grand, they can still make 60 grand off of it.
Yeah. Well, and you can also kind of see with this property too, when we talk about with a lot of properties, you know, kind of our first goal is essentially, you know, to get the properties secured, but then to make them just more appealing to investors. And you know, we might do something like get a property cleaned up, you know, and then get images of it. Kind of like with that home, you know, where you can see some of the stuff that's going on there with the inside. It's fairly appealing to investors, you know, like that, especially if it. And we were looking at the interior that it had sheetrock on the walls, you know, basically in kind of an unfinished state of repair. And we may just leave it just like that. There's lots of investors that are kind of looking to do that kind of work. And so, you know, to rehab the property only makes them not interested in it. So a lot of times, you know, we'll get images of the property just like that. But you know, once we've got it, we'll have better images here that we can provide online for prospective buyers. But a lot of it is just trying to make the curb appeal better.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There was another lot for sale. I can't find the listing now, but this lot for sale right here, they picked up for 500. You know, these Kalamazoo lots were, really were probably pretty good deals. I think that they went ahead and moved that motorhome, got the motorhome leased off the property, but they're listing this for about $10,000 or $12,000 as well. And we can see some of these lots, 700, 500. Something that small like that would probably avoid because it may not be buildable, but a lot of these lots could have been buildable lots. And that's in fact something we're going to talk about here in a little bit, is how to determine if it's a buildable lot or not. But as we scroll down in here, this is where we can get into some of the properties as well that were for sale within Flint, Michigan. Now, Flint, Michigan is a tough market. We'll be straight up about that. But there was quite a few properties in here that were pretty good condition, picked up, could still be used as a rentals. This property right here was picked up for $20,000.
That's a good buy.
Yeah,
SEV of 48,000 on it. It's probably worth 100,000 or so, and so to pick it up at that price is pretty good.
yeah. Well, and when I was trying to look at some of the comps there, I don't think that's the right place. Click on their map view. You can see that there's still cars within the parking lot. That's what kind of made me interested in this particular property, is that you can see that there, as of June 2025, which this is kind of right before the auction took place, you can see that they don't have the signs out yet. So we know that the auction took place after that. But at that time, you can still see cars within here. You can still see the businesses open. And I think that there could be, businesses here on the bottom. I'm not sure if those are businesses up top or, apartments, but there's a communication place. It looks like that there could be some other stuff within here. But you might be able to buy this property and automatically start renting the property out to the current tenants.
What's appealing about it is that it does look like it's a dual use property, in that it has both residential and commercial properties within it, which is nice because again, it's just unique. There's not too many properties like that.
Yeah, here's a little teeny house that sold for 2,300. You can see this property sold for 3,100. And so when you're talking about $2,100, even if you could just, that's a tiny little place, but could you rent it out for $500 a month? It's going to pay itself off in 6 months. Even if you had to it's such a small place, you wouldn't have to put that much into rehabbing it. Even if you repainted all of it and put in new carpet, it's probably not more than 400 square feet.
Yeah. Dealing with smaller houses like that certainly is going to simplify the process of rehabbing. If you do want to rehab the property, then choosing small properties, like these are certainly going to make your job a little bit easier. But a lot of it just comes down to what's the cheapest price that people can find housing for, and at these price points, being able to pick up a property for a couple $1,000, yeah, like Steve's saying, you're going to be able to find buyers. You're going to be able to find somebody that needs a place to live. There's always people that are looking for entry-level housing. And a restaurant too, huh?
And picked up for 5,200.
Oh, that's
And
cheap.
this is Flint, Michigan. It is a tough market, and hopefully we don't have anyone from Flint that gets offended by that. But it is a tougher market. But if we are picking up properties for cheap enough, then it can still make sense to buy property in a market like that.
Yeah, really, it's more about the price that you're paying than it is necessarily about the market. At least if you can get a good enough deal on a property. We're not talking about trying to get properties for a few percent under value. We're trying to get properties for remarkable deals. For 10, 20% of value, 25% of value, and you pick properties up at that low of a price, and it really doesn't matter, because you have a pretty good active market and buyers that are there.
Yeah, this commercial property right here ended up selling for $5,200. So it is kind of interesting. Here's 8,400, 3,600 for that house. That looks like it could be a duplex sold for 4,100. And some of them are going to be in better areas. In fact, we've actually bought properties in Flint before. That's a decent little home there, and they'll range in value between 40,000 to 100,000. And as long as they're in good, clean condition, they actually are selling and flipping a lot of property within that area. It's just, there is some drawbacks, obviously, to it, but it's also they're selling a ton of property there as well.
Yeah, I mean, really, the biggest challenge is just that there are a lot of inexpensive property deals there on the market, more than in most markets. So you're competing against a lot of other inexpensive deals. But if you pick up the right property there at the right price, you can make money here just like you could anywhere else.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and you can get them for so cheap. I mean, you're buying them for, 10 cents on the dollar. So it is an area of the country that we've got to check the market. We've got to know what we're buying, but also there's a lot of investors that made money on it. Now I'll go ahead and pass this back to you, Shade.
Okay. And let me make sure I'm showing the right one here. Okay.
So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what do we need to do to determine if we have a buildable lot. And we were looking at some of those lots there. Some of them, many of them probably are buildable. There were some that probably aren't going to be buildable on that list. How do we determine that? What do we need to do to make sure that the lot that we're looking at is going to be usable? When you hear me and Shay talk, we always say properties have to have two things. They have to have both use and value. That use is going to be an important aspect of that because we need to make sure that the property, especially if we're talking about land, has some type of use.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, usually the use and value tend to follow one another. So if there's use, there tends to be value. If there's value, there tends to be use. But Steve's right in that just looking at some of the lots, they might even look like they're usable properties or good, buildable properties. But truthfully, we really won't know until we look it up and find the answer in black and white, because all it would take in order to take that from being a usable property to not being a usable property would be for the local area there to change their requirements, which they could do in a meeting or two. So that can happen and does happen in a lot of cases. But that's essentially what we need to make sure of, is if we're going to buy a lot, we need to make sure that it's a lot that can be used for that intended purpose. So residential lot, we need to make sure that it's big enough or that a house can be built on it. And that is what we're essentially trying to look for. And it's actually one of the bigger risks that investors face as well, is buying a property under the assumption that it's usable, only to find out after they've purchased that it is not actually usable. And the problem with that is that its usability is going to dramatically affect value, and properties that are not usable tend to have very low values. And so when we are looking at any properties in an area in their zoning, the question we always have here is is this going to meet the usability requirements? And in order to find the answer to that, we need to go into the local ordinances or local zoning laws that define exactly what usability is and find what that number is. Somewhere in black and white, there is an answer to that specifically, where it says, well, usability requires 7,500 square feet and a minimum width of at least 50 feet or something like that. That's what we're looking for, is a specific answer so that we can know if our property meets those requirements or does not meet those requirements. Now, in order to find the answer, we're going to have to dig a little bit because the ordinances that control this are not always clear. In other words, it's usually going to be a small town or a city that has the laws that would cover this building that we're going to look for. Sometimes it'll be under the address. Sometimes we can just look and see where the property is located at and find it from there. Sometimes it's in the address. If we can figure out what city the property's in, sometimes it is that city. If the property is located in a city, though, then we're usually going to start searches for that particular city's zoning ordinances in some kind of a search tool. And what it may pull up for us, in fact, there's a couple different places that we can look. There's usually going to be a city website, or a local government website where they're going to have stuff listed, which can help us with things like zoning or changing zoning or different kinds of zoning applications. In this case, if we're looking up lot sizes here in zoning for Pine Bluff, Arkansas, it gives us a couple of different options here. The first option, it says, is Code of Ordinances, and is part of a municipal library. And the second one here is a link to a different website that is for the city of Pine Bluff. And this is something for zoning specifically. Pretty common here, in this case. The top one is what's going to be our actual ordinances or our laws. And the second one down is going to take us to the city website where they'll have things like a zoning map there, which we can look at to see how our property is zoned along with other properties around it, or to make zoning appeals or to ask questions. This would be the number that we would most likely call or contact them. But this is not necessarily where we're going to find the answer on what the requirements are. That's probably going to be in the ordinances.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two things to remember when we're talking about finding the zoning information. If the property is located in a city, town, there's a 99% chance the city is going to be in charge of that local zoning. If we're talking about more rural property that's out in the country, then it could be the county that actually determines the zoning. But for most of the properties that we look at, we're going to be looking in city type of governments. Now, like Shade mentioned, and like that last slide showed, there's going to be two different areas that we're going to research for those. We're going to research those in the city website, and the city website may have a link to the ordinances. There's also different types of ordinances that are put together within states that we can research those as well. Now, we're going to be taking that ordinance, and that's kind of the written rule, and we're going to be comparing that to the zoning map. So for us to determine the zoning, we really need two different things. We need the zoning ordinance and we need the zoning map so that we can see, where that property is located. Now, as we're looking at this zoning map, we can see that it has different colors on it. Each one of those colors is going to represent a certain type of zoning, whether that be R1 or R2 or R3. Those are just different residential type zonings. Then we can see, oh, that's yellow. That means that it's R1, and that means R1 properties need to be at least 8,000 square feet to be a buildable lot.
Yeah, what the zoning maps really help us to do is see how the zoning works with our property and also all the properties surrounding it. We can see how they are zoned as well. It may help us identify if there's opportunities there to get properties rezoned. But what we're going to do to try to find the full answer is going to be done from the ordinances here on that we found. So that first link we were looking at, we click on that. It would pull up the code of ordinances here for Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And the ordinances cover everything. These are just the general laws that they have, for that city. So we're usually within that, we're looking for things related to zoning or property use. And in this case, it's down in chapter 29. But even beyond that, just in the zoning, what we need specifically, and this one, it's called district regulations. And what we can see there is it defines what different districts are, R1 residential district, R2, R3, and it has definitions for each one of those. So if we're looking at how these regulations are, we can see here are all the regulations that they use. And so, some places use commercial stuff. They use B for business, instead. But other than that, though, very similar to some of these others. Now, what we want to look at is to see what their how they define R1 residential. And so if we're looking at their district regulations here, and this one is under R1 residential. So this section applies to R1 residential district. It's intended for use in new single family residential areas. Now, if we're looking at permitted uses there, single family dwellings, accessory use, home occupations, and then we can see that any single lot subdivided and recorded as the effective date of this chapter with a 60-foot width at the building line and 7,200 square feet of area may be used at the discretion of zoning administration where R1 setbacks can be met. So that's the black and white number that we're looking for there is 7,200 square feet and a 60-foot width. You know, that we can know for certain if our property is going to meet those requirements or not, and for certain we'll know whether our property is usable or not. And each one of these district regulations are going to have different requirements. You know, typically as housing density goes up, the square footage or size requirements tend to go down.
Yeah, exactly. So within R1, we realize that it needs to be 7,200 square feet and 6,000 square foot and 60 feet width. With R2, we can also see there what type of properties can be used. So we have single family dwellings, accessory, and other buildings. That could be like a garage, home occupation. And here we can see that for R2, they only need to have a 50-foot width and 5,000 square feet. We can also see some of the additional uses that could be considered down there as well. But in this case, we know that we could place a home on this property. It doesn't appear, and we could look further down if they allowed us to have duplexes. Maybe it requires it to be R3 to be a duplex, or to, you know, have something like a mobile home. Here within R4, you can see R4 actually only requires a 40-foot width and 4,800 square feet. But down there at the bottom, you can see modular and manufactured homes. And essentially kind of the difference between those is a modular home is something that was built entirely in the factory, isn't on some type of frame that you can travel. So kind of like a single wide trailer would be considered a modular home. A manufactured home is one that's completed in sections and then brought to the site, put on a foundation, and then put together.
Yeah, and in both cases, yeah, what's unique about this is there's going to be a limited number of R3 residential lots, you know, in this city or in this area, and so it makes the lots that are available here more, you know, more desirable, because anybody that wants to do housing with a manufactured or modular home is going to need to have R3 residential in order to do it. And so, you know, that part of it will make this property more desirable, and will give us ways that we can sell it. But yeah, we can see that with R4, it's down to 40-foot width and 4,800 square feet in area. And so yeah, we would know specifically what the requirements are here for these homes and what kinds of properties here they allow, because it's more than just the requirements. It's also about what types of properties, you know, that they will allow. And so those are both things that we look at. In this case, you know, we would know if the lot was listed as R1 residential, we know it's 7,200 square feet and 60-foot width, and it basically works its way down as the density of the housing from here increases. But knowing that answer there is important to find, and also to be able to relate that to potential buyers. Yeah, I think it's helpful for them to know that the property is usable, you know, because you checked on it, you know, not because you're just saying that or because you're guessing on it. You know, that the property is usable, meets those requirements. Another thing that we have to look at a lot of times with usability is related to utilities. You know, different counties treat things a little bit differently. Some counties actually treat usability. Well, usability depends on access to utilities, you know, which we've dealt with that in several places before. You know, but access to utilities is a big deal in a lot of these areas. In fact, we've dealt with places before where they've also had usability was also defined by access to utilities, and if it had, it was the number of things it had access to. It was like if it had access to 2 out of 3 of them. It basically meant that the property, it had local sewer, it had local, you know, it had everything it needed there for the housing.
And part of that kind of has to do with something like a septic tank. You know,
Yeah,
if the lot is small enough, you know, they may not want, if it has sewer there, then they're fine you putting a home on that 6,000 square foot lot. But let's say that you need to put a septic tank, well, then maybe you need to be 10,000 square feet, because that extra, you know, that extra size is going to help justify putting in something like a septic system.
yeah,
So
fabulous.
what we're going to do now is we're going to pull up an auction that we attended last year, and we're going to look at a couple of different properties and go through and look at their zoning information. So this is the Little Rock area of Arkansas. You know, this was from the auction that took place last year. But what we can go ahead and do is pull up the zoning map and start looking at some of these properties and getting an idea of what the zoning is. Now, there's two types of different zoning maps. In fact, when we have more time, we teach this training in our members webinar. There's the PDF zoning map. So for smaller cities, things like that, they may have just a PDF map that's a PDF map that you can download that's color coordinated, and you kind of look on that map and see where the property is located. A lot of the larger cities, in fact, even smaller cities now have online zoning maps, when they may have this feature available in their GIS maps, where you can go ahead and take that information. In fact, actually go down, Shade. Don't click on that one. That one you can go, but go down here a little further to let me see. I don't know why it's pulling up different. I guess you can probably click on that first one.
Is it one of these ones further down?
I sent over the link as well, but that first one will probably do it. There's a place where they have a bunch of different maps. I don't know why it's pulling up now. Not right now. Maybe it's that third one. No, that's not it.
No, this is a zoning map that would work here for us. At least it has what we can see here are it's color coordinated here according to the zoning type. We can actually enter in an address if we want to pull, to go directly to a specific area. So if a property has
click on the ones that are white or the ones that I looked at earlier. And so we're just going to copy up to Cone. We won't need the full address. Sometimes they won't let you use the full address.
Yeah, it's just going to be based on the street.
This is actually a different map, so it'll be interesting to see if it pulls up the same.
And here we go. So 3411 Cone Drive here. It has pulled it up here, and we can see that it is in.
You'll have to click on it itself. So see right next to it where that vacant lot is to the left. Just click on that. And then you can go up to the top and click on the little arrow.
We see it R2.
Yeah. So
what's nice is they do have, they have the what the requirement here is of 7,000 square feet right there.
yeah, exactly. So in that case, we would know that, if this lot, based on being 7,000 square feet, we would look at the record information. I believe it is bigger than 7,000 square feet. I think it's an 8,000 square foot lot or 9,000. It would definitely be a buildable lot.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things I know that happened here in this sale, this particular sale in Little Rock, was they had a bunch of lots that were in North Little Rock, and these North Little Rock lots, and they sold a lot of these lots, but it turned out that all of these lots were not usable because they didn't meet the requirements there for use. And it was why we ended up, passing on a lot of them, but it was lots just like these ones right here, which I'll have to pull up here. I don't see the square footage on here, but I'll pull it up here just so we can see exactly where it's at. But what happened was, at the time that these lots were subdivided, the lots were usable, but then a few years back, the city of North Little Rock decided to change that and to make the requirements, to change the requirements because they believed it would help property values or something. And so what they did was they increased it from, let's say, a 5,000 square foot requirement up to 7,000 square foot. But what that did, though, is it made all the lots that had been subdivided no longer usable. So a single lot was no longer going to be usable anymore. And throughout all the properties in the sale, basically none of the ones that were in North Little Rock were considered usable. But you would never have guessed that, though, by the people bidding on it. And so we know the people who were bidding on it did not know that they were bidding on properties that were not usable or that couldn't be built on.
Yeah, just like Shade mentioned, they had changed the law, and so a 5,000, 6,000 square foot lot was no longer a buildable lot, which, which was a very simple thing that any of those investors could have done there at the auction. Sometimes the big auctions actually attract more informed investors or more uninformed investors than any other type of sale. That's the reason why online auctions is actually a great way to buy property, because for the most part, most of the people that are bidding at online auctions are some type of investor. When we're talking about smaller county auctions, we may not have as many people as well. But in some of these big city auctions, they'll hear that there's a tax sale taking place, and you'll have a bunch of people that have no clue what they're bidding. In fact, we'll see it time after time where we see two people bidding against each other, thinking that the other person has, the T on that property, and there's a reason that they're paying so much for it. And so they're bidding just thinking the other person has done the research, and come to find out both of them, I don't know how many, I bet hundreds of millions of dollars have been lost by investors over the last 20 years buying land that isn't buildable and that could have been, researched before buying and, determining that it wasn't going to make sense to buy it.
Oh yeah, I'm sure so much money I'm sure has been lost. But it's interesting. So for the city of North Little Rock here, if we needed that information, they have their own ordinances here that you can download. And what we do is we go from here and look for the zoning classifications.
It
And
might
so
be
here
in section
you actually,
4.1.
yeah, section 4.1. So you actually see in section 4.1 right here that we're looking at, we have the zoning districts here, and then we have each one of these different districts, and so we can automatically go to these pages in order to learn about them. So for instance, page 34. And here we go. Okay, so general provisions applying to all districts.
One thing that's been helpful as well, now I'll never trust it, I always verify, but I've been using AI lately I'm just doing a Google search and looking at the AI information about what is the buildable lot size for this particular city. And sometimes it'll give you some valuable information with links that you can go back and double check. So I won't ever trust it, but that is a way to get a quick idea. And I'll also look at links that may be able to help you find that information.
Yeah, now this is handy here. A table, if we can ever find tables, they tend to be handy because they usually just are a way to simplify the information and make it a little bit easier here. So we can see that like for instance, this one has a minimum square footage requirement here of 4,000 square feet, which makes it a little bit easier for us.
That's an R0 though. I don't even know what an R0 is.
That's true.
Like
What is R0?
I don't think that any of the properties that were in the auction were R0. Here we're
Yeah,
starting at R1, 7,000. I think if we go down, unless this is an older version, and look at R2 and R3, I think it stays at 7,000. Yeah, R2, 7,000. So usually we may see a drop there, especially as we get down to R3. It should be 5,000 square feet there, like we saw in Little Rock. But like Shade said, they went ahead and did this, and they think that they're somehow improving property values, but really all they're doing is putting a bunch of vacant lots that are non-usable. And so I think especially with the way it is right now, we need to find ways that we can make housing more affordable. And so not allowing people to build on these lots, I think some of these cities need to reevaluate the type of properties that they'll allow to be placed on these lots. I think smaller type homes could be something to look at.
yeah. What's interesting is how just some of the things that they have listed here. They do kind of help identify exactly what setbacks are here and what requirements they have, so that you can figure certain things out. So they have for instance, the home needs to be a certain distance generally from the front line on the property. There needs to be a certain amount of setback here or width requirement.
Yeah. Well, and that'll kind of determine which way the home is built, as long as we can fit those requirements. And if we're looking at a square lot and it has the right frontage, and it's not like really weird, say it's really skinny, it's 50 feet, but as long as it looks like a square normal lot, then the setbacks are probably going to work. It's just depending on what type of property can be purchased or built on that lot.
Yeah, well, and obviously changing different kinds of zoning can dramatically change what the requirements are. For instance, like a buildable lot in a rural area might be 5 acres. It might be 10 acres. You really don't know until you go. And so for instance, in this area we're looking at, this is some kind of a commercial or business one they have set up here. And they've got a 30,000 square foot, minimum area there. We've seen lots of areas. In fact, there are a lot of places, lots of rural places where minimum lot sizes are multiple acres. And so just because a property seems to be big, I mean, we certainly avoid everything that's smaller than 1/10 of an acre, but even then, it's not always an indication that it's going to be close to being usable. Usability requirements can vary quite a bit, but we've seen we know that you're not going to find anything under 1/10 of an acre, but when it comes to how large some properties need to be, uh, generally the larger the better. But for use, we're always going to check that before we place any kind of bid. In fact, we usually check it early enough on, just because it's an issue with the property that's it's a make or break issue. If it's not usable, then we're going to toss the property and move on. And so we do need to make sure that it's going to meet that requirement before we do any more research on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and this is going to be helpful information for you. It's going to be helpful information when you try to sell the property, letting the property owner know, or the new buyer know, okay, yes, it's buildable. Also, we'll continue to find out additional information, especially if we after we buy, but we try to find out before we buy what type of utilities are in the area. Is it in properties within the city location, probably going to have a higher chance that it's going to have water, power, sewer. As we get into some cities, maybe it has, sewer, power, and water, but you've got to provide a propane tank or something like that for gas. But that's going to be helpful information as we craft and turn around to sell these properties about what are the potential uses and what are the utilities involved. Now, one thing that is nice is these ordinance maps many times will have utility layers that we can click on as well, that will help us see what are the utilities within this area. In fact, I don't know if it was North Little Rock or Little Rock, I was using one of them last year looking at the utilities within the area. So hopefully that gives you guys kind of an idea of how we go about and research the minimum lot size. It is such an important thing. Please don't buy property unless we've looked into the zoning. It's going to be an important aspect. Now, we're going to be looking here in a minute at a big, huge piece of land that's coming for sale in one of the California auctions, 27 acres. It's going to be important even in that type of property to determine what the zoning is, because if we were to buy that property, we would be looking at developing the property, and we'll get into that here in a minute, why that makes sense. But to finish out today, what we're going to do is we're going to go look at an upcoming auction in Kern County, California. It's actually a pretty big sale. It looks like there's over 900 properties, or close to 900 properties, probably some of them redeemed, that are available within this auction.
Yeah, it is. It's a big sale. Whenever you have that number of properties, 900 is just a humongous auction for tax sale properties like this. So there will be a lot of redemptions. So there's going to be a lot of properties that will go through the sale. Now, California is a tax deed state. Meaning that the county basically will wait until a redemption period expires and then foreclose on properties and offer them up at the auction. And California state law gives property owners 5 years. So they have a 5-year redemption period before the county will foreclose on a property for unpaid property taxes. But aside from that, they use a standard premium bidding system, where highest bidder wins. They don't have over-the-counter properties. They actually just do resales. And so you'll never see a California property available over the counter, but you will see them offer subsequent sales to any properties that didn't sell. And also, they do have a lot of auctions that are online, including the one that we're going to go and check out right now. This is one of the online auctions. This one for Kern.
Yeah, in fact, when talking about the resales, one of the cool things about California is if it does get offered at the sale and goes into the resale and doesn't get sold, then when they go ahead and do these resales, they can drop the price to a minimum amount. So we've seen properties start at $100, $500, $1,000. In fact, I'm convinced that there's going to be properties, as I've looked through this Kern list, there's properties where there's way too much back taxes that they're probably not going to get bid on there at the auction. So I think in 3 months, 6 months from now, we'll see these Kern properties come back up onto the market with a lower minimum bid amount for any of the properties that didn't sell.
Yeah, in fact, that's got to be bound to happen, because we do see that sometimes where properties will just end up with a tax bill that almost outweighs the property value itself, and the county's going to have to do something to drop that in order to get anybody to buy. Yeah, so here's a property here that we can see, one of these, number 5 here on the list. It is a house, and we've got the address right here. So this is in Bakersfield.
Yeah, I think it starts at 20,000. Was that how much it started at?
41,000.
41,000. Let's see if it's got too high of an opening bid.
Yeah, let's see. There we go. And let's see, does that look like our property?
Yeah, looks like it's great. It's kind of interesting because it looks like a little house that might be next to commercial or close to commercial anyway. Go down and take a street view of it. This is actually one I added right before the auction. I didn't really get a chance to review it too much.
All right, so our image here is from May of 2022.
It's pretty old.
Yeah, so it's 4 or 5 years old. But at the time, it looks like it was probably occupied here at the time. Kind of looks like it.
Yeah, I think it was occupied.
And it's a decent neighborhood. Definitely a commercial neighborhood, though. Yeah, I mean, there are residential homes with lots of commercial stuff around it.
It's kind of a little residential, strip. And there probably, if you go down the other way, there's probably going to be more homes. That it's one of those properties that are bounding commercial property and residential property. So this would be a great property to look as a potential rental. You could probably flip it as well, I'm sure, but this would be probably a good rental property where you could bring in residual income, depending on what you're able to pick it up for. What does Redfin have it valued at?
At 170. Yeah, that's a pretty big difference between what Zillow was estimating at 117 and them at 170. They only have 2 comps too.
Yeah, there's a few more down there below. It is kind of an interesting property at $40,000, depending on the condition. Could it be worth paying $50,000 for it? Might be. We probably wouldn't go much more above that. We'd have to look a little bit more into the market, because if it's worth 170, then there's more profit than if it's worth 117. And that's part of the reason we always say, we're using Zillow and Redfin just as an idea, as an estimate, and then we'll determine what the actual value is using our own comparables.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look. And it is such a big auction here. You can see all the properties, all the pages here. We've got more than 10 pages of properties. And they do provide us with some information. And let's go. So this one has a minimum bid of 86,000. It's to a Randy Hughes. We can see this one is R1 residential. We can see the address here on it of 311 Panorama Drive. And yeah, this is a house. Let's pull this up. Okay, that's our house right there.
Yeah. What does it look like with the street view?
So this is from January of 2026. That's a new street view. It's like it was last month.
Hey, can't get better than that. What is that? Oh, something.
Yeah,
Thought it was
I
for
thought.
sale sign or something.
Yeah, I thought so too. Why does that say 313? That's weird. I swear
What
that
does it
says
say?
312 there on it. It doesn't look like it says 311, but I'm pretty sure that 311 is that one.
It looks like it. I couldn't see it good enough to know.
Oh, weird. Look at that. So that address 311. In fact, yeah, looking at it, I did think it said 312 on the house, I thought. But in that sign right there says 313. That definitely is not a 3, I don't think. It looks like 312, but the way that that is set up though, we can see that how the addresses actually line out here. Oh, what weird. The house on this one, this side doesn't have a number either.
Yeah, in fact, what I'm actually looking at now is I'm looking at the parcel map to determine the lot and see if it is if it's the right. I think that there might be a discrepancy there, but it very well could be the property.
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird. It's just looking at it overhead, like
Oh yeah, there's definitely some kind of issue between the county record. That's where we need to look at the overhead map and make sure that it's the actual lot that we're looking at.
yeah, and the way that we could figure it out, if we can pull up the assessment and see that it includes the house, the improvement value, that kind of stuff, then we're okay. What we've got to watch out for is these cases when they have a lot like this, where I guess maybe there's two and one of them has the property and the other one doesn't. That's what we'd want to watch out for. This one is a little bit weird though. It does seem like there's some kind of a mistake here between the addresses and what's written. And
Yeah.
it appears to be for the house, $86,000 worth of taxes, which is a fair amount of taxes. I would think that that would be for the house. But
Well, when I looked into the county record earlier, it had assessed value showing it was a structured property. That's the reason I think that there may be a mistake. In fact, one of the properties we were looking at, I think it might have been on a training with with our students, but remember that dollar store
yeah,
in Florida, that if you're looking at Google, it takes you over to a different address, but you can see that this is where the property was located. So occasionally we'll find these different type of issues, and that means that we need to look into it more to make sure that we are buying the right property. Look at the GIS map, look at the assessment information, maybe even look at a plat map, which was what I was just looking at now. And it looks like from the plat map that this property, regardless of what the address is the property that we're looking at. At least
the
that's where the
house.
lot lines are. Yeah, based on the
Yeah,
plat map that I'm looking at now.
yeah, that would make sense. And actually, we've run into issues with county records and accuracy a couple of times. Really, I mean, it's fairly common with all the records the county does. They get certain mistakes, and yeah, we've seen it quite a bit. Where there is confusion about what the county is actually selling, what the record is for. This house though looks pretty straightforward here, 409.
Yeah, and most of the times we're not going to find problems, but if we do see something that looks suspicious, like we just saw there, that's where we're going to do an extra level of due diligence to make sure that we're purchasing what we think we are. One thing I can say about this is definitely, that little neighborhood looks pretty nice. It's kind of the the least cared for home on the block, in my opinion. The only
Yeah,
one that has beat up grass.
yeah, it is. Yeah, and it's a nice neighborhood. It's a nice neighborhood here. It'd be a good place to own a rental property. All 154 on Zillow. And 193 here on Redfin.
800 square feet, not real big. It'd be easy to turn around and to rehab. What is the rent estimate on that? $1,600 a month.
Yeah, quite a bit. For the property value, where it's at. I mean, I don't know if there's anywhere else in the country where you can get that kind of a rent amount on, on $150,000 payment.
Yeah. Manhattan.
Yeah, yeah, that is probably about it. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of income potential for for a property that's not valued over 200,000. It has the ability to bring in like $35,000 a year. That's crazy.
Yeah, even LA areas, some of those areas even worse.
Well, let's see here. Let's look up. Oh, there's an art. Let's go look at this one here. Okay, so we've got all of our properties here.
For the next one, I think you got to go to number 19. I think I looked at it by accident clicking on that one that took me to the last page.
Oh yeah. And let's see. 22 here. All right, right here. So starting with the minimum bid here of 138,000. This is R3 multifamily.
Yeah, I almost didn't. I almost just automatically didn't look at it. It has a high opening bid amount, 138,000. And then when I was looking over here at the overhead, I thought, well, those are some trailers there, but maybe it's just it's just a lot. But then when I went and looked at the actual address, that told me more about the property, that this is actually an RV park. And they almost look like they have permanent addresses, at least they have their own mailboxes and everything. So I found that kind of interesting when I looked at, well, this isn't just this is the actual RV park here that has multiple addresses where people are currently staying and renting space.
Yeah, so it looks like it's a couple acres probably total, maybe 3, 4.
But you can see the mailboxes there.
Yeah.
And as you scroll back there, look back there further, you can see the different trailers and things that are set up. So people are currently renting this, bringing in residual income, and this is the type of property that you can buy and at the tax sale and automatically start doing the same thing. In fact, as the company, what do they call it there?
Village Lane
Village
RV.
Lane.
Yeah, Village Lane RV Park.
Which means that they've already got the licenses and everything set up to be able to do this. So suddenly this property looks a lot more interesting to me because you could be renting out each one of those spaces. They probably rent for a pretty good price, especially if they're providing any type of things like water or power or utilities. They may have all those kind of hookups there. It looks like there's quite a extra spaces there that you can, bring in more people to it.
Yeah, it looks like it's only maybe half filled right now.
If that.
Yeah. Yeah, that is kind of an interesting property there.
Looking at the value, I was trying to do the value. That was a little bit hard to determine the value on it, but kind of where it's based on.
It's not nearly as big as I thought it was. It's only 0.62 acre. That's crazy. I thought it was a couple acres.
Yeah, it does look like it's bigger than that. Kind of an interesting property, I thought. I looking at the value, I think it's worth about $500,000, but I only had so much time to look at it. It was really hard to find what is an RV park going for. How many spots? I think you could maybe fit 10 to 15 in there. Maybe less than that, but probably 10 to 15.
Yeah, I wonder if these last two are next to each other.
They are next to each other.
They are. Let's pull them up here. So, oh yeah, one of them's 27 acres, and the other one is 20 acres. Yeah, and yeah, Vinland Road here. Let's pull up one of them.
In fact, these are really interesting as far as, building, subdividing and making new subdivision. In fact, if you look at the map there, you can actually expand it if you click on that click expand button. And you can see,
yeah, you can see all the construction. Look at that. They're doing one right there.
yeah, right
You could
there.
do the exact same thing.
Well, in this lot, you can go back down a little bit. You can come in from this City Hills Drive, but then that second lot is the one that goes to the road here, the 178. So this lot is the top portion, and the bottom lot is the bottom portion.
Oh, I see.
So combined, you're looking at,
Yeah, like 50
50
acres.
acres. Yeah, 50 acres or so. And you can also see that it's completely surrounded by new construction. Now, we'd check to see, what new construction is going for, how much is expanding. But I would think that this land has to be worth 10 million, maybe more than that. I'm just doing a quick, kind of looking quickly to see what kind of land like this is selling for. But these two lots combined, I think would probably be worth around 10 million.
Yeah. Well, so the minimum bid on each one of them is like roughly 500,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of them's 500,000, one of them's 550,000. And so just opening bid on the two is about $1 million starting. And yeah, I wonder what somebody could actually pick it up for and win it for, because it really is something you could probably develop there if you got it for the right price.
Well, if you click on that link there, it'll take you there to the street view shade and to kind of the Google view as well. I kind of wanted to see what this, looked like within that area. And it could be worth higher value than that. It could be worth lower value than that. But I think that there's going to be significant value, in this property. So that's kind of that main road that would go straight into that new lot. And the new subdivision, you could have it come in from this side, and you could have a road coming in from the main highway as well. But if you go down there and kind of look at the street view there where it's at, you can kind of look at the lot a little bit.
Oh yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. It almost looks like it's been cleared before.
Well, I think it's kind of more, it's straight ahead right there. So it's not really the stuff on the left, it's more the stuff that's kind of straight ahead right there, out there. Goes
Yeah, I
all the
mean,
way out there.
it is a lot of it's all been farmed before. I think it was cleared to be farmed at some point.
Yeah. But there's a ton of new construction. Even recently, you can see that there was, as we were looking at the overhead there was ground that had been cleared recently. So it could definitely be subdivided.
Just here, different time of year here in winter, I guess, on this one. And you can see
Well,
it
it's
a
back in
little bit.
2022.
Right there's where it changes.
And that's from last month.
Yeah, that was pretty recent.
You can see they were trying to sell it at one point there. Some graffiti on their sign. But, if they don't sell it here within the next week or so, this is going to be coming up to the tax sale, starting at the back taxes. And it really, I think, it's prime real estate, especially if you can pick it up for a discount. So even if building is slowing down a little bit there, this is prime real estate that you could get if you can get it for a lot less than the market value, then it's going to be a good investment. Whether you start building it on it now, you start selling it to somebody who's eventually going to build on it, or even just sitting on it and holding on it. That's definitely a valuable piece of land. Great subdividable, land that could be subdivided.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Grace has a question here. How can we find out the average bid in California in order to win a property in Kern County? I'm not sure about bid averages here, and what you could probably look at last year's results if you wanted. You could probably see what things were selling for last year in the sale. It was probably a pretty big sale last year as well, and so I'm not sure how I would go about trying to figure out what the average amount is that things are selling for there. But I do know we probably wouldn't apply anything different to California to any of the other places in terms of the percentages of value, that we're generally looking at. We just bid our maximum percentage, and if somebody's willing to pay more, then they can take it.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go ahead and follow what we talk about in stage 3 due diligence, where we set our max bid based on the property class type. So, we have 1 to 5 classifications in each type of property, whether that be land or structured property. And then based on the property's value, based on the condition, will depend on how much we decide to pay. So like we mentioned, we usually will never go above 50 cents on the dollar. And to get to a 50 cents on the dollar, the property's got to be in really good condition, really desirable area, usually going to be structured properties, kind of like the properties that we reviewed last week there in Texas. So if you guys have any other questions, we can go ahead and answer them. We definitely appreciate you guys being on tonight. We had to kind of rush this together a little bit, so we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, and it's a good time of the year right now for tax sales. In fact, there are so many sales happening right now, and the prices that we see people bidding at auctions and the kinds of deals we see, it's getting better and better. I mean, things are kind of ramping up right now in a weird way. It's similar to what we've seen before when the real estate market took a dive. It helped the tax sale market. The tax sale market got better. After the 2008 crisis, there was increased inventory and less direct competition, and so there were just better deals in general. And we kind of feel like that same thing is happening again, where the market's shifting and the tax sale market's getting better.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and there's going to be so many opportunities. We've had a ton of opportunities over the last month or so. There's still a ton of auctions that are taking place, good opportunities over the next month or two. But really in about 60 days from now, it's going to really ramp up, where there's going to be multiple auctions happening throughout the summer. If you're looking for tax lien certificates, now is a great time to get involved. We're just finishing up the February Arizona auctions. In May, the beginning of May, end of April, we'll start looking into the auctions that are taking place in like Florida for tax lien certificates. And then for tax deed auctions, we of course have all of our opportunity-based auctions. Those are the auctions that take place one time a year, and we participate when it takes place that one time. Or then we also have our location-based auctions, states like Florida, Texas, where we can go back multiple times a year and do deals within those areas.
Yeah, in fact, timing wise, California has a lot of sales that are happening right now, and over the next couple of months, we'll see a lot of California sales that will offer up their properties. So this tends to kind of be the time of year that you try to approach that. But in other areas, though, it's different times of the year. Like for instance, we know in May, Florida will start their tax lien stuff, and there are actually a lot of counties that do their tax lien sales in the summer. The summer kind of is like a tax sale season for many areas. So it does get busier and busier as the summer, as we get into the summer and get into late summer. It's probably the busiest time of the year for tax sale investors.
Yeah, absolutely. So we appreciate you guys being here, and we'll go ahead and send out the replay to everyone, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. We'll be back again here next week. We'll see you then.
Yeah, thanks again, everyone.